You ever feel like you're kind of wandering through life?
Yeah.
Like just hoping you're on the right track, but not really sure?
Yeah, I think we all have those moments where we wish we had some kind of divine guidance, right?
Like some kind of spiritual GPS.
Exactly, some clear direction. And I think that's what makes 2 Nephi 32 so fascinating, because it really does offer some practical insights into receiving revelation.
Okay, so 2 Nephi 32, right? Speaking with the tongue of angels. That's how people usually summarize it.
Right. And that phrase, the tongue of angels, it can sound kind of mysterious and maybe even a little intimidating. But when you dig into the chapter, it actually becomes a lot more accessible than you might think.
Well, let's break it down then. What does it actually mean to speak with the tongue of angels?
Well, the chapter starts right off the bat, verse 2. Do ye not remember that I said unto you that after you had received the Holy Ghost, you could speak with the tongue of angels? So it's connected to the Holy Ghost.
Okay, but are we talking about like literally speaking another language here?
Not in the traditional sense. Verse 3 clarifies what Nephi is getting at here. Angels speak by the power of the Holy Ghost. Wherefore they speak the words of Christ. Wherefore I said unto you, feast upon the words of Christ. For behold, the words of Christ will tell you all things what you should do.
So it's less about speaking a mystical angelic language and more about tapping into the same sorts of communication that angels use, which is the Holy Ghost, which is the power through which we receive the words of Christ.
Exactly. And that's where this idea of feasting on the words of Christ comes in.
Right. So it's not enough to just like casually read a verse here and there.
Be more intentional, right? Like think about how you would approach, I don't know, like a really delicious meal.
You wouldn't just like inhale it in 2 seconds.
You'd savor it, You'd take your time, appreciate the flavors, really let it nourish you.
So feasting on the words of Christ is kind of like that.
Yeah, it's about actively studying the scriptures, pondering their meaning, and letting those teachings really sink deep into our hearts and minds.
Okay, that makes sense. But I think we can all relate to those times where even when we're trying to be engaged with the scriptures, even when we're trying to pray and be receptive to the Spirit, sometimes it just feels like we're not getting any clear direction.
Oh, absolutely. We all face moments of spiritual darkness or confusion, and Nephi actually addresses that directly in this chapter.
Where does he talk about that?
Well, check out verses 4 and 5. He says, And if ye cannot understand them, it will be because you ask not, neither do ye knock. Wherefore, ye are not brought into the light, but must perish in the dark.
So he's saying that sometimes our lack of understanding comes from not actively seeking understanding.
Exactly. We need to be willing to ask questions, to really seek knowledge, to persistently knock on that door of revelation.
Like we got to put in the effort.
Right. Revelation doesn't just magically fall into our laps. We have a role to play in seeking it out.
Okay, so I'm with you on that. But, practically speaking, what does it look like to knock on that door? What's the tool, the method we can use?
Well, if you keep reading in 2 Nephi 32, you get to verses 8 and 9, and it's pretty clear what Nephi's advocating for. And now, my beloved brethren, I perceive that ye ponder still in your hearts, and it grieveth me that I must speak concerning this thing. For if ye would hearken unto the Spirit which teacheth a man to pray, ye would know that ye must pray. For the evil spirit teacheth not a man to pray, but teacheth him that he must not pray. But behold, I say unto you that ye must pray always, and not faint, that ye must not perform anything unto the Lord, save in the first place, ye shall pray unto the Father in the name of Christ, that he will consecrate thy performance unto thee, that thy performance may be for the welfare of thy soul.
Prayer,
yeah. It's the direct line, the essential channel for communicating with God and receiving guidance from the Holy Ghost.
So it's not just about asking for things we want, but also about aligning ourselves with God's will, seeking his guidance in every aspect of our lives.
That's a huge part of it, yeah. And I think what's really powerful in verse 9 is that Nephi urges us to pray before we take action, not just after. We need to seek God's guidance before we make decisions, before we embark on any endeavor. We need to ask him to consecrate our actions.
To consecrate, what does that mean?
It means to make something sacred, to dedicate it to a holy purpose. So when we consecrate our actions to God, we're essentially aligning our intentions with his will. We're saying, God, guide me, help me make choices that are in line with your plan for me, choices that contribute to my spiritual growth.
Wow, that puts a whole new perspective on even the most mundane tasks.
It does, doesn't it? Every action, big or small, has the potential to be infused with spiritual meaning and purpose when we seek God's guidance.
So if we want to speak with the tongue of angels, if we want to access that divine guidance, the key is to consistently feast on the words of Christ, making prayer a central part of our lives, and consecrating our actions to God.
Yeah, that's the beautiful, powerful message of 2 Nephi 32. It's a roadmap to deeper spiritual connection and to receiving the guidance we all crave.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for this time.
Yeah, I think so.
We hope you found this discussion helpful. If you did, be sure to follow our podcast and subscribe for more discussions like this. And until next time.